Hello, everybody. Welcome to Common Censored. Thanks for joining us for another week. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And we did wait till Wednesday for this episode, but I think it was worth it because now I get to tear apart the Democratic National Convention, which this year is really the Democratic National TV show because it's not live in person, meaning, and it's just everybody watching Zoom calls.
I think there was a dystopian novel written about a situation just like this.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You mean when your presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates walk up to the podium wearing ninja masks? You mean that part of the dystopian reality?
Oh, God.
By the way, I am joined. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, full disclosure, I have not actually watched them because and this is also the reason that we're a little late. I had a little bit of bout of food poisoning, so pardon me for delaying the podcast, but as Lee pointed out, that means that we get some juicy commentary on the dystopian shit that Lee has watched, but I have not.
Did you see you just outed yourself? I covered for you by saying we waited so that we could discuss the convention.
But I want to be honest with people, Lee. I want to tell them that
This show is not about honesty.
And I also wanted to tell them that, like, if they didn't watch the fucking convention because they don't want their brain to start melting into a viscous shit pile, I understand. I felt the same way, ergo I didn't watch it. But Lee has taken a bullet for all of us.
Actually, let me clarify. I have not exactly taken a bullet. I've maybe taken a little bit of shrapnel. I have watched some of the speeches because I'm going to break up and play some clips on Redacted tonight. So if people watch Redacted this week, then there will be the actual, like, play a clip, make fun of the person, play a clip, make fun of the person. So I'll be doing that this week. But other than watching a few speeches, I have largely not watched it, but I did have it on a different tab on my computer. And I was going back and forth between that and an ESPN documentary on competitive eating. And at times I didn't know which one I was on. So there was that.
America.
Actually, there's literally because for the most successful competitive eater for a while was this Japanese guy Kobayashi who doesn't speak English, but he was the best in the world. And there is a point in the documentary where the American fans of competitive eating who used to support him because he was the best in the world, all of a sudden there was another American, Joey Chestnut, who started to be competitive with him. And when that happened, all the Americans shifted to the American guy and started hating the Japanese guy. And all of a sudden they're like booing him. They're saying, go back to fucking China, King Kong Wing Wong, like all this. They're like yelling awful shit at him. And these are basically the same people who used to support him because he was the best, but now they hate him because there's an American competitor. And it's like, and in the interviews for the documentary, and he's speaking Japanese, but they're translating it. He's like, I didn't really understand the culture. I didn't know that, like, you boo and yell mean things at competitors. I thought that you just thanked them for being your competitor.
Oh, God. I just thought you
horrific.
people were less awful than you turned out to be. That was what I originally thought.
That might also be it. Yeah, that might also be it. So, moving on to the convention, which I know you, even though you haven't seen some of this, I know you'll have thoughts on it. But, and the other thing is, some of you might know, I did a 18, 20-minute live stream discussing all the things the DNC will not say on their air. And the video came out to be shit. So I'm going to repeat some of it on here. Most of you won't have heard it. But anyway, the thing I found fascinating from last night was that in a kind of impressively Machiavellian move, the DNC set up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to just be fucking torn apart. They just set her up. It was like a sting operation. It was like when the cops to send out things saying you've won a new television, just come down to this address to collect it. And then the people they're looking for a crime show up to get their TV, and then they're arrested. That's how it was, because AOC, despite only given 60 seconds to speak, was given one of the few speaking spots, relatively few. Nobody else in the squad was giving a speaking spot. Tulsi Gabbard wasn't. Andrew Yang wasn't. So plenty of people not given any time. She's given 60 seconds. And what do they ask her to do is, as in every convention, anybody with delegates, or anybody who won a state, I guess, gets presented as for nomination. I present Bernie Sanders. And so that's the standard way it works. And so she was given that task. So in her 60 seconds, which were, good and well said, she talked about healthcare and things. She basically said these wonderful things that we need to be doing, and Bernie Sanders is speaking up for them, and so I present for nomination Bernie Sanders. That's her job. That's what she's been told to do. That's what she's been asked to do. Bernie Sanders put her name up to do it. And then immediately, as if these articles were pre-written, the New York Post, NBC, and other outlets come out with headlines that say, AOC uses speaking time to nominate Bernie Sanders, not Joe Biden. And they basically just... Now, for anybody listening to this, because you probably listen to this because you despise Joe Biden, and many of you probably like Bernie Sanders, or at least liked him until he said vote for Hillary or whatever, you are thinking like, well, good, I'm glad she did that. But most of America is being told that AOC, in her brief 60 seconds on air, turned on the DNC and just shat on their face and said, I am putting up Bernie Sanders. So literally she did what she was asked to do by the DNC. And then the articles were pre-written, ready to attack her for turning on the DNC.
I mean, I have to hand it to the DNC, though, because I'm really amazed that people like AOC and people like Bernie Sanders are always so willing to play along. Like, if they would have asked me to do that, maybe I would have said, okay, I'll do it, but then I wouldn't have actually done it. And then what are they going to do? It's like, why and Bernie.
Well, they're worried about their careers.
Bernie, who always says shit like, oh, well, we got to get in line behind Hillary or behind Biden. It's like, why are you so willing to fucking bow down to the people who have not only fucked you over, but the entire country? Like, what? I don't understand. What is that?
Well, I would argue it mostly has to do with careerism. I mean, the same reason Bernie Sanders has never once spoken to the Green Party or touted them or said that anything they do is positive. He literally won't answer their phone calls. I know that from internal Green Party people. For 30 years. And that has to do with careerism. That has to do with, despite speaking up for a lot of important things, he's still, at the end of the day, somewhat of a politician. And so he's trying to save his career or whatever. Now, I don't understand why he did it this last time. This is the last time he's running for president. He's old. He won't even be in Congress probably in, 2 to 4 years because I assume he'll retire. And it's like, what are you trying to say? I think he's trying to, at this point, just defend his legacy so he's not viewed as a spoiler against Donald Trump. I don't know. But with AOC, it's absolutely careerism. Every time she, bends over for the DNC, it's, and by the way, that's not a sexist term. I would use that with anybody.
But it's also, it's of course ironic because someone like AOC gets into politics to make it different. And of course, I'm not saying that she hasn't had a lot of great points. She has, but it's like, if your whole reason for getting into politics is to be different, and then you fall in line because that's what you have to do to be in politics, why?
Well, that's that's the brilliance of this system, is it slowly pushes what the person finds acceptable in order to protect their position. And I'm only talking of the farther left-wing people in Congress. I'm not, the main Democrats in Congress, they're, from the word go, they're like, how much is the check? All right, I'll say it. So most of them are not even concerned with it. The ones that are concerned slowly get pushed farther and farther. How far will their, moral compass be allowed to bend in order to protect their position? And so with AOC, it's like, basically, I don't know that they say it in this many words, but basically she's been offered this deal of you get to stand up for a lot of the things you believe in, immigrants and gay rights and, the poor, inequality, Medicare for all. You get to stand up for all those things. In exchange, you act like you know nothing about Venezuela, and occasionally you make one comment about how Maduro's a dictator. And I think that they just close their head off to the things they're giving in with, and just focus on the ones. It's like, well, I'm making a real difference on Medicare for all. I think that's how they do it. And it's sad. It's sad to see, but it's kind of a tried and true technique for slowly capturing the people that are more left than the Democratic Party would allow, than the corporate, party would allow.
So what happened next?
The other thing you should know, because you haven't been watching, is that it has been a Republican fest. In their brief allotted time, so it's 2 hours a night, and so far it's only been 2 nights, loads of Republicans. Some of the key ones are John Kasich and Cindy McCain, given prime speaking spots. I didn't see Cindy McCain's speech, but I saw John Kasich's, which was like 5 minutes or something, which you compare that to AOC getting 60 seconds. Right. Bernie Sanders did 8 minutes. So Kasich got, most of what Bernie Sanders got. And it's Republicans talking about how much people need to vote for Joe Biden. And the whole point that the DNC thinks this is making is, look, these are such dangerous times that even the Republicans are coming over to our team. But the real point they're making.
That is how it stands to a lot of Americans too. Like, I know I've seen people online that are like, see, I mean, this is how bad it's gotten that even the Republicans are on our side now. And I'm like, our side? What? That's not my side. What the fuck are you talking about?
Well, that's the thing, is the point it's really making is that Republicans are no longer afraid to be part of the Democratic Party because it is the Republican Party. It's just it's so a slightly less, outwardly toxic Republican Party.
Oh, I actually read, I want to share this with y'all real quick. Folks might remember Bree Newsom. She's the badass that climbed the flag pole in was it North Carolina or South Carolina to tear down
Carolina
the rebel flag.
The rebel flag was on their front lawn. They had lost a lawsuit saying it couldn't be, or maybe they lost a vote saying it couldn't be their state flag, so they just put it on the front lawn of the Capitol.
Yeah, so she climbed up that fucker and was like, "Nope, not today." But so that was a few years ago. But she posted, she tweeted this out a few days ago. She wrote, "I don't know how to help people understand how far to the right the Democrats moved since the '90s, and that things folks celebrate as liberal victories, like the ACA, actually began as conservative proposals. They've got y'all adopting Reaganism as progressivism." And that is, I mean, and you could, of course, argue that they weren't fucking liberal in the 90s either, but it's like the Democrats are not the other side. They're the same side. They're like, it's not even like diet Republican. It's like just like a different shade of Republican. Yeah, exactly. And that's what all these Republicans speaking on the DNC, convention, so-called, that's what it shows. That's what it speaks to. It does not speak to like, oh, these are really tough times. And by the way, Kasich, he was on the same night as Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders gives his speech saying, here are the things we need to fight for, and Joe Biden will do that. He will be the one that'll fight to help with healthcare and blah, blah, blah. And then you have a speech by John Kasich where one of the lines he literally said was, "I know Joe Biden and he won't turn to the left." Well, I hate to say it, but John Kasich is right and Bernie is wrong.
I love the idea that like that he was like, listen, for all of you so concerned that Joe Biden is going to become just a fucking pinko communist at the drop of a hat, the moment he gets into the Oval Office, he's going to reveal his Russian mustache. Yeah, not so much. And by the way, that was a joke. Russia actually very capitalist nowadays.
Yeah, no.
Last note, which I know we're spending too long on this. Last 2 minutes is what I did in that video that I've now deleted because it didn't really come out. Is talk about all all of the deepest core issues that will not even be mentioned. I don't mean they won't be given a lot of time. I don't mean they won't be fully discussed. I mean the DNC would never even mention them. Is like that list is a long list, and it's like the fucking core issues of this country. Things like capitalism. I bet you through the whole DNC, 2 hours a night, all week, they don't say the word capitalism because it is assumed that they are ultra pro-capitalist like the Republicans, and they would never even question it. Never even, I mean, they probably won't even mention it to say like, listen, we love capitalism. It's like, it is as taboo to discuss that in a political forum like that as it is to like talk about which religion is correct or something, Like Joe Biden's also not going to be like, listen, if you don't believe in Jesus, then get off this, turn off the TV right now.
Yeah, well, and that also speaks, I mean, some people, of course, don't mention it because they don't want people to ask that question like, oh, what's capitalism? And is that really the best? But also, just like if you ask a fish whether it's in water or not, I think some people are just like, what? This is just what it is. Like, this is what life is. Life is just capitalism. So I think like a lot of people, it doesn't even dawn on them. They're like, well, of course this is this. I mean, how could it be any other way? Because they're so out of touch with the needs and the demands of the average people who on the ground in the United States are definitely questioning capitalism, particularly younger folks. They're so out of touch with the average person that they would, I mean, it would be so bizarre to even ask that question.
Well, and speaking of how they're out of touch with younger people, they have shown a lot of people of color, which I suppose that's good in that it means that they feel a need to at least not act like they are an all-white party. However, with the exception of Michelle Obama and ultimately Barack Obama giving speeches, the actual lengthy speeches are almost exclusively white people and largely old white men. I mean, it's like Bill Clinton, John Kerry, John Kasich. So at the end of the day, the party leadership and the powerful, longer speeches are still allotted to the old white people. Yes, Michelle Obama, everyone's like, oh, Michelle Obama gave a great speech. But of course, that's the exception that proves the rule. They are, the Obamas, both of them, are look, we have a black face that's important. So really, at the end of the day, it's still an old white party.
Right. And of course, with that comes the class issue. The Obamas are the exception that proves the rule with regards to the ability of black folks in the U.S. to become part of the elite. But they have just as little in common with a black poor family as they do with a white poor family. And I just have to, I'm sorry, I'm like reading tweets over here, but this was just too good. And I don't know, like Marianne Williamson must have like changed her, like crystal thing because she was definitely on top of the
she
the
switched
slapbacks.
Crystals.
Yeah, she got like some angry crystals or something. But so Mark Ruffalo tweeted, I'm watching the Dem convention and it's so good to see so many diverse people coming together addressing racism and the promise of America, which I'm pretty sure the promise of America was to kill indigenous people and enslave others, but whatever.
Yeah, wasn't that on the flags back in the day?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. If you're white, here, come have a slave and kill an indigenous person. And then Marianne Williamson responded, no, I'm sorry, but they did not address racism. They showed a lot of pictures of POC and made some references to BLM, but there was not one mention of an actual policy to help end systemic racism. It's like binge watching a Marriott commercial.
I know. I love that last line. Binge watching a Marriott commercial is
so
fucking brilliant.
amazing. Ah,
And it's so true. I know you haven't seen it, but it's so true. It is person of color after person of color saying, and they get basically one sentence. These are not the main speakers, so it's like a clip, and they say like, this country needs to be about people that look like me, or something like that.
Right.
And we are the future, or whatever. And there's nothing of me. There's so little policy or actual change. It's just, look, we found this person. I mean, literally, they had one of the people they had on there was a young black woman who ran the elevator that Joe Biden got into. And she said, most people ignore me, but Joe Biden got in there and he saw my story and now he's my friend. And it's like, look, I'm glad he was nice to you. That is better than being an asshole. However, he's done nothing for you. He literally got into an elevator, realized you're a young black worker whose job is to bring the elevator up for him. And if he acts friendly with you, it looks good.
Right, exactly.
And we'll then put you on the convention platform.
Right.
I mean,
right. Dude, yeah, it's all this performative, all of the performative bullshit. Oh, God.
Oh, and one other thing. I was reading this article today about, how great Michelle Obama stole the show. This is from NBC. But one of the sentences, let's see. Michelle Obama stole the show, bringing a perfect measure of empathy and a gold vote necklace. It said vote, apparently, by a gold vote necklace from Bai Cherie, a small business owned by a black woman, which immediately became the hottest accessory of election season. I assume they mean black women.
Too soon?
Because it does seem like the DNC is using black women as an accessory.
No, it's so true.
Of this election.
It's just such disgusting tokenization that, and of course, I mean, like, Biden can sit there and talk to this fucking woman in the elevator. He probably put her family members in jail, for fuck's sake. But he gets to stand there and be like, I met a black person that I wasn't an asshole to. It's like, why does that make you... Why the fuck should we applaud that? That's absolutely disgusting. And of course, like, the whole, vote necklace reminds me of... I mean, it's just interesting to see how these things don't change over time, because one of my favorite periods is around the French Revolution. And there's...
I'm not even sure I have a favorite period.
I just love the French. I don't know. But I also just love the French. I mean, anybody who just eats a baguette a day and wears red lipstick and drinks coffee at a cute little cafe while reading a book is just fine in my book. Anyway.
Well, your line used to say it was any culture where you can eat bread and chocolate all day long and stay skinny as a rail is my kind of place.
It's so, well, I mean, just the nonchalant laissez-faire air of these beautiful, and I'm not even talking about real thin, I just mean beautiful in general French women with their red lipstick and their sort of nonchalant I fucking love it. Anyway, that's not my issues. My dreams about French women are a totally different subject. But during the French Revolution, they would sell, there were sellers that made good money selling the tricolor and the little messages that would say liberté, égalité, fraternité, liberty,
so
equality, and brotherhood.
the flags for the French Revolution,
right? And women would get their hair done because they had the big hairdos and shit. They would get their hair done with in the three colors. I mean, it was so trendy, and so
so even then.
Yes.
Revolution was sold.
Right. And this is, of course, people talk about with the Democrats, that's where movements go to die. And that's so true. It's where like in 2016, there were all of these stores that sold shirts that said I'm a nasty woman or whatever. which my friends in Sweden like hadn't seen that shirt, and they were like, "What's going on?" And in the U.S., but they didn't know what it was about, and they were like, "This sounds very like porn-esque. Like, what's going on? Why is everyone wearing this shirt?" And I'm like, "Oh well, out of context, that does seem kind of odd." But it's like that. It's like we're going to sell you the alternative. We're going to sell you. It's cool to be against the system, right? Like Hillary Clinton is against the system. She's a nasty woman. How cool is that? Like, no, that's not. No, that's not it at all.
Right. She's not against the system. Something else you would have loved is they gave her about 30 seconds was Muriel Bowser.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Standing on a balcony overlooking Black Lives Matter Plaza, which she pointed to and said, Donald Trump, blah, blah, blah. Oh, when he used tear gas to have a photo op holding the Bible, I decided enough was enough.
So I painted Black Lives Matter on a street because I hope that makes everyone go home and shut up. For those of you who don't know, Muriel Bowser is the mayor of Washington, D.C., and she's a black woman, and she is vehemently anti-black in her policy. Her police chief, for instance, this is just one example. Her police chief, for instance, is a total white supremacist, also a wife beater, just a fucking grade A human being. So yeah, Muriel Bowser is a horrific mayor when it comes to policies that would actually help the most marginalized folks, which in the district are black and brown communities.
And so she actually said, she pointed to the painting Black Lives Matter on the plaza, and then she said, but it's about more than that. It's about, actually creating change and creating, blah, blah, blah. And of course, never mentioning any policies that she has put forward. In fact, I believe she gave more money to the police department in the middle of this,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So, again, perfect representation of the Democratic Party. Look at the thing I painted on the street so you'll ignore the actual policies.
It's like, a lot of these have been going around the internet, but I saw another one the other day that was like, somebody is drowning and says, help me. And the Republicans say, no. And then the Democrats are like, we hear you. We see you. No. And I was like, that's so fucking spot on.
Listen. We are right there with you. And in fact, I'm going to have this former drowning victim speak to you about how great it is that they are now friends with Joe Biden while you drown.
The last thing you hear will be Biden's voice.
The last thing you hear will be this previous drowning victim telling you how the Democratic Party is quite good.
Oh, God.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. I will not go through all the things that are not being said, but my list includes things people can imagine, like the fact that the U.S. is the largest prison state in the world, the 1,000 military bases around the world. I mean, that's why they're not allowing Tulsi Gabbard to speak, because they would assume she would say something like that. UBI, they're not going to discuss. Andrew Yang won't be up there. They're not going to cover, just how housing should be a human right, how toxic and harmful gross domestic product is as a way to measure reality, AI, mass surveillance. Anyway, every basic massive core issue of our country will not be discussed or mentioned or touched with a 10-foot pole.
America. Yeah. Well, thank you, Lee, for taking one for the team and watching that for all of us who can't.
For those who want a summary, watch Competitive Eating.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, speaking of horror shows, so COVID is still a thing.
Heard of it?
Yeah. And according to the CDC's website, there are now more than almost 5.5 million cases in the United States, a total of 870,000 deaths. And this is from August 18th. There are some numbers that I found elsewhere that say that it's now above 170,000. And just to kind of put that in perspective, that would be roughly 60 9/11s.
Yeah, and for those who are saying, "Oh no, it's not that high," they're just claiming everything's a COVID death. In fact, there's new numbers showing quite the opposite.
Right.
That because we're now at the level of statistical analysis where you can know in a population of 300 million what the standard number of deaths are within a certain range. Within the range of a few thousand, how many people will die within the United States, assuming there's not some massive tragedy like a fire that kills 10,000 people or something. You can know those numbers. So a recent statistical analysis came out and said that America so far this year has 170 to 200,000 excess deaths, meaning more than would be statistically ever expected. And that's clearly because of COVID.
Yeah, and testing in the U.S. is just such a mess. I mean, people still, I've heard, personal stories from folks that I know getting turned away because they're not symptomatic, which of course, as folks probably know at this point, you can be asymptomatic and still have the fucking thing. Even in Sweden, a friend of mine, the only thing that happened to him was that he lost his taste and smell for a little bit. Then he went and got tested and they're like, "Yep, you have COVID." And he's like, "Really? I just lost my taste and smell." So it's like it's not like the common cold where everyone pretty much has the same symptoms. There's a vast array of symptoms that are different for lots of folks. And speaking of Sweden, here in Sweden, the total number of dead is above 5,000 at this point. There's more than 85,000 cases. And just as a difference, because I keep getting people not texting me, but contacting me being like, "Yeah, fuck, Sweden's doing such a great job." And I'm like, which Sweden are you looking at? So next door in Norway, there are some 10,000 cases compared to 85,000 in Sweden. And there are 262 deaths. Which I don't mean to laugh because that's still 262 people that died, but what the fuck? So I did some math. Granted, I'm not like a super duper math whiz, so if I fuck up, I apologize, folks. But of course, people will sometimes make the argument, well, like, look, the U.S. is a country of more than 30 million people. How many fucking live in Norway? Well,
300 million.
300 million.
Yeah, you're not giving people reason to trust your math skills at the moment.
So the population for Norway is something like 5.5 million, and the population for Sweden is roughly 10.3 million. So even if you
it's like a U.S. state, basically.
Right. And so even if you looked at that, well, now my math is all fucked up because I actually accidentally did 30 million. So, but either way.
Well, the point is that 5,000 deaths does not sound that large, but when you proportion it out per capita, it's actually very high. And comparatively to the United States, it's not, the United States is like one of the worst in the world, and Sweden's up there per capita deaths. Right.
And it is there's a site in Sweden that shows you how many people, it's going up each day. And while Norway is pretty much at a steady spot, Sweden continues to go up like maybe 200 cases a day.
And I think most people know this, but we neglected to say it at the beginning of this. For those who haven't really been following it, Sweden is one of the only countries in the world, or one of the few, that decided to have essentially no lockdown, no mask requirement, there's not a lot of social distancing. People are still at bars and restaurants, and I mean, literally, there's hardly a person using a mask in Sweden, and so people who want to believe this is nothing are pointing to Sweden and saying, look, Sweden did it right and they're doing great. And it's like, sometimes they'll even be like, only 5,000 people have died. And it's like, well, no, you're talking about a much smaller population, and compared to the neighboring countries, it's doing terrible.
So while you were talking, I redid some of the math. So Sweden has roughly 30 times, the U.S. has roughly 30 times more people than Sweden.
Right.
And if you look at 5,800 deaths versus 170,000 deaths in the U.S., you once again have roughly 30 times the amount of deaths. So Sweden is pretty much like on par with the U.S. when it comes to deaths per capita, which is disgusting. Meanwhile, Norway is 54. So Norway is roughly 5.3 million people. That means the U.S. is 54 times the size in terms of population. Yet the U.S. has 648 times the amount of deaths than Norway.
Right. So So ultimately, if you do the per capita analysis, rather than just saying 5,000 is not a very big number,
Right.
The per capita analysis, it does work out that like Sweden is suffering heavily per capita, and the U.S. is suffering heavily per capita, and other countries that did their lockdowns appropriately are not suffering.
Yeah, it's almost like the whole science thing works. And, here in Sweden, basically the politicians have said, well, the mask thing doesn't really work 100%, so why bother? And I've actually had this conversation with people here in Sweden, some folks that I know, and I'm like, well, nothing's 100%, you fucking idiots. That's not how science works. But it's like that. I think I shared it with you, Lee, a while ago. There was a meme that was going around that said, well, the comparison here is if like if the masks work, why the 6 feet? If the 6 feet works, why the masks? And then this person's response was, if the airbags work, then why the seatbelt? If the seatbelt works, then why the airbags? If both work, then why do you have brakes? It's like, no shit, because there's a lot of things that we should be doing to ensure that you can mitigate. It's not, nothing is a zero-sum game here. It's like, you can mitigate the amount of pain and suffering and ultimately death, but there's nothing that's going to completely ensure that your entire nation or your entire community is left unscathed. But you can try to unfuck it as much as possible.
Right. So like the mask, most of us now are wearing masks that are not, high grade medical hazmat suits. And so what it does is it decreases the amount of, saliva droplets and things that you're spewing out of your face when you speak, when you laugh, when you cough, when you sneeze. But it doesn't stop at 100%. So if you were to walk up to someone with that mask on, sneeze full force into the mask, you're still going to fill the room pretty quickly with your, air droplets. Right. And so you could still get the person sick. However, if you're wearing that mask and you are standing by them breathing quietly for a moment and then walk by, the odds of you spreading it to them are much smaller. So these are all percentages. You're decreasing the odds that you're going to get something by a certain percentage. And, we've seen the impact. We've seen New York go from one of the worst places in the world. This is when there was basically no effort to stop it. They didn't even really understand how much COVID-19 was in the city. And people were still going to restaurants. De Blasio was saying, I'm not prepared to close restaurants yet. Right. All this shit. And then we saw them do the complete opposite. They locked down. They put on masks, everything. And then after a month, because it takes a while for the changes to have an impact, after a month, they're now one of the cities with the least spread of COVID-19.
Yeah. I will say,
and the worst areas in the U.S. are right now are Texas and Florida, two places that believe that it's not real and that the Earth is flat.
I will say, in Sweden's defense, in terms of testing, at least, because Lee, you mentioned that the U.S. is not at all paying attention to testing the way that it should. Those numbers are actually a lot higher than 170,000 dead. But in Sweden, people are able to get tested pretty easily. So, and it's free because it's part of the healthcare system.
And not fear that they'll go in for a test and then doctors will find something else and then they'll leave with a $10,000 bill.
Right. And while Sweden has some issues in terms of healthcare, when it comes to these kind of like emergency situations, Sweden is brilliant. So, when if somebody accidentally like hacks off their finger while making dinner, like you will go in, get immediate care that is wonderful, and it'll be $0. And, delivering kids and, getting kind of surgeries and things like that. It's a great and free system. So I will say that the numbers that Sweden is offering up are far more accurate than the ones that the U.S. is.
Yeah, and as we've discussed before, Sweden has other medical issues, which if we as a world, as a globe, were dealing with everything like rational beings, we would look at what works around the globe and we would mimic that, and we'd look at what doesn't work and we'd avoid that. So you'd look at the Swedish system and you'd say, well, what's working? And it's like, oh, well, dealing with emergency situations, we're really good at that. Well, what's not working? Oh, well, it's really tough to get elective surgery and, there's a long line for them. Okay, well, let's fix that. And let's leave the other part or whatever it is. Whereas instead, and I won't speak for Sweden, but here in the U.S., we find good ideas or we see good ideas around the world, and we run away with from them as fast as possible, as if it's an angry hive of bees that all want to talk to you about life insurance. Like,
I think I had a nightmare about that once.
It is amazing how quickly we run from good ideas.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I will, I'll say this for Sweden, that they are looking at the U.S. and being like, hey, it's kind of like when you're shit-faced at a bar, if we can even remember that far back, when that was a thing you could do, and you're flirting with someone that you would never like if you were sober. And then and
if the lights were on.
Right. And then like later, your friends are like, dude, that was, why? This is what Sweden is doing. Sweden is apparently shit-faced in a bar, looking at the U.S. and being like, hey, your healthcare system seems kind of cool, and adopting shit from it. And meanwhile, most of the people I know in Sweden are like, what the fuck, man? No, do not go home with that person. That is not your type. This is such a bad idea.
Someone needs to turn the lights on in Sweden. And the other thing is you got to turn the music off, because loud music totally dulls the other sentences.
I think Sweden just needs a better wing woman, to step in and cock block when necessary.
You mean Denmark's not doing the job?
No. They're also shit-faced.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more topic. What shall we do?
So I just wanted to touch...
Oh, actually... Sorry, before you do that, let me do some quick housekeeping. Everybody, just wanted to remind you and thank all the new donors, all the new Patreons, for joining up at patreon.com/commoncensored. There's no ads on this show. It's completely funded by you, the listener. So if you feel like you got a dollar's worth, please go over to patreon.com/commoncensored. Also, my comedy special's free at leecampamerican.com. Eleanor's movie continues to get awards and honors. That's at hardroadofhope.com. And my book is now 20% off if you use the coupon code, the initials of the title, BPAPL. And you can do that at leecampbook.com. Get 20% off by using that coupon code. All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so I just wanted to touch on this real quick because it's something that we haven't talked about in a while. But as people are going back to school, because, that's a good idea, there have been some articles and some talks about, well, what about college football? Because, and so I mean, just that alone, it's like, first of all, we're not talking about, death. Secondly,
well, hold on.
We're not...
The number of suicides that will occur if college football doesn't happen is pretty high.
Secondly, when I was a tyke, folks would talk about college like it was...
You said tyke, right?
I did.
Okay.
I'm going old school here. People would talk about college like it was a place of higher learning, not higher forward passing. So
higher level of brain trauma.
Right, exactly. You can get a concussion earlier in life. Congratulations. So there are all these articles. I've seen at least 3 articles about, what a lost college football season would mean for the economy. And it's like, wait, what the fuck? Like, basically, I pulled some quotes from this one article, which was in CNBC, that says, if things are bad in athletics, it's bad in higher education. Okay. Why? Why was it ever structured in a way that a place of education should be dependent upon a fucking football team in order to make ends meet?
Right. And literally the way it started was these were like side things that were done for students to have a little fun.
Right.
These were not like when universities first became a thing, it was not like, oh yeah, the football program will fund half the school.
Yeah.
It was like football was like a weekend thing that would be done with like the guys' girlfriends or boyfriends watching.
Right, like intramural type shit. But there was another quote in this article that says, as catastrophic as a lost season could be, the absence of football could spell a much more concerning trend for the higher education industry. The industry of higher education. And that just really speaks to the what happens. And we're looking at this with regards to the USPS too. When you privatize something and make it about profit, it will no longer work for people. Like, you can't have it both fucking ways. So when you make a place of education about profit and about the NCAA making bank off of 18-year-olds that can throw things very far, then you obviously can't make it about education. It's ugh.
Yeah, and economist Richard Wolff was talking about this recently as well, that a lot of these colleges worry that if they don't make the money from football, but also the money from actually housing the students, the money from all the food the students buy, all the in-person books they buy, like all the things that students on campus pay for, if the university doesn't get that money, then they could collapse or go bankrupt.
Right.
And his point was, this didn't used to be an issue until universities, many of them, became profit-seeking entities. Right. Once they did that, they needed to maintain profit in order to make investors happy and not go bankrupt. So now you have this situation where so many universities could go bankrupt, whereas it used to be that if you had an economic downturn, I imagine this is how it was during the Great Depression, universities weren't fearing they would exist.
Yeah.
They would exist no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's something that should be there for the people at all times, like healthcare, like housing, like the post office. Like, these public good entities should be there at all times, no matter what's going on, so that people can have not just the ability to survive, but to thrive, to learn, to fucking, expand your mind and all of that other shit that they say in the college commercials.
And speaking of the post office, I did a video this week at youtube.com/momentofclarity about the post office. And first off, yes, Trump is trying to kill the post office, and he wants to. They've now announced they're not going to make the changes before the election. But either way, the reason he wanted to right now and fast is because he wants as few people to be able to vote as possible. That is true, okay? I'm not denying that. I'm not saying Trump's a good guy. However, the Democrats are running around right now going, they're trying to kill the post office. Republicans want to kill the post office. Trump wants to kill the post office. Well, in fact, in 2006, the bill that basically immediately sunk the USPS deep into debt because they have to fund their pensions 75 years in advance. Like, the first year, they were like $5 billion in debt or something. And caused, immediately in the coming years, caused 65,000 employees to be fired from the USPS. Mm-hmm. That bill was co-sponsored in Congress by 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and was voted for by every single Democrat in fucking Congress. And actually, 20 Republicans were the ones who voted against it, but basically voted for by almost everybody in Congress and every Democrat. The Senate did a vote of consent where they just yell, yay, and they all, basically say it passed because they don't want to be caught on record. But the point is, the long-term destruction of the post office in order to make money, in order to privatize it, in order to get that fucking cash cow was from both parties because they are one corporate party.
Amen.
So, shall we wrap it there?
I think that was a good nice like bow that you tied that off with.
That was I brought the fire and brimstone there for the conclusion.
You did.
So we're going to run over to patreon.com/commoncensored to do 10 to 15 extra minutes there. We hope you'll join us. As I mentioned, grab my free comedy special at leecampamerican.com and Eleanor's new movie, hardroadofhope.com. And email us anytime, commoncensored@protonmail.com. If you are owed certain perks for the tiers you've signed up for at patreon.com/commoncensored, please email us so we can get information from you, commoncensored@protonmail.com. You can email us topics and everything else. And all of Eleanor's other work is at artkillingapathy.com. As I mentioned, I've begun doing more live stream Moment of Clarity segments, and those are all at youtube.com/Moment of Clarity.
Amen. And until next time, act out.
Keep fighting.